They say when you wear Black Power Media gear, you can accomplish anything. You can play any and every position. From coaching, to kicking, to receiving, to running and juking. And, oh my goodness, I see that again in slow motion. Get off me. And you're going to have a lot of haters coming at you, but what you got to do is you got to shake them off, and get to your goal and accomplish it. And when that's done, it's a beautiful thing. I'm talking about going hard, extra, for that extra point. And when it's done beautifully, you talking about touchdown. Oh, and the crowd goes wild and they're celebrating with you and everything. Man, let's see that again. Nice.
Black Power Media, baby. That's how we do it.
Now go to blackpowermedia.org and get you some of that gear. Empower yourself today. Yeah.
I mix what I like, what I like, what I like, what I like, what I like. All right, what's up, world? Welcome to another edition of I Mix What I Like right here on Black Power Media. Again, I'm Jared Ball, very happy to be your host. You know what it is and what it is that we do around here. But first, of course, like, share, join, particularly our Patreon. If you are willing to share with us your few dollars a month for a membership, please subscribe, but then put your membership dollars on our Patreon. The link is in the show description, along with many other links and bits about our guest, where you can follow up on my own work, previous shows, and of course the broader BPM platform. So please tap in, make sure you have the bell rung so you don't miss all the endless offerings that we have coming and that we have on the platform already. And make sure if you're here live, welcome, and put this in your social so others can join us. That said, let's get right into it. We're going to have I'm very excited to have our next guest on, and it's always fun for me when the Discord and our colleagues in the I Mix What I Like crew, Aaliyah and Josh, get involved in introducing me to what is for me a new world of thought and academic work, public intellectual work. And so I got introduced to our next guest and look her up, and of course the whole world knows who she is, and I'm the last one to the party. So I always appreciate that as well. And I'm very interested to learn more about her work, and having investigated what I could over the last couple of days, there's a lot to digest, and I'm very, very much interested in engaging more with that work, particularly another media communications scholar. I'm always looking to expand and build with peers. So but I really, again, want to shout out the process that brought our guest to the platform, the collective nature of it, and I want to continue to encourage that more of that continue. So, again, that all said, without further ado, I want to introduce our next guest, who, among many other things, Professor Imani Barbarin, who, among many other things, is a communications professional specializing in content creation, social media branding, and marketing. She completed her undergraduate career at Eastern University with a degree in creative writing and earned a master's in global communications from the American University in Paris. She writes from a perspective of a Black woman with cerebral palsy and specializes in blogging, science fiction, and memoir. Ironically, she did not like the idea of writing this mini bio, so I want to grant her the opportunity to add anything to the bio that I might have missed in capturing. And she has also alerted me that unfortunately her camera is not working, but we will at least be able to hear and engage her. And I welcome her now. Professor Barbarin, welcome to the platform. It's good to hear you and meet you. Welcome.
Thank you so much for having me. I do apologize for my camera not working. But yeah, my name is Imani Barbarin. I'm a disability rights and inclusion advocate as well. I use social media and communication to talk about disability in ways that affirm the experiences of disabled people, as well as give disabled people the autonomy to tell our own stories, which I think is important.
Right on. So I was thinking of ways to get us started, and as I was, trying to catch up to your work, One, I'm very fascinated in the course you now have available. Again, all this is linked in the show description to your work and more, so folks can follow up. But I'm very interested in your what is now available for everyone, your course on media literacy, and specifically that you talk about semiotics, which is on the low, kind of what is it? One of my favorite lesser discussed topics. So I was very excited to see that. But then I have to admit, I go on Twitter and I see you, which is new to me, but you seem routinely and deeply engaged. A tweet that we talked about on the morning show this morning. So I thought of doing it this way. I'm going to pull it up here because your tweet said, "Black men are not the white people of black people. They're the police." And I shared that I disagreed, but wanted to hear more from you. So I thought I'll say it this way, and then of course you could do with it what you will. Could you explain the context that leads us to seeing this comment from you on Twitter? And in so doing, maybe in the process, talk about how your perspective on media literacy plays into what we're seeing here as sort of or I'm lofting up as a sort of a conclusion of that work, if I could put it that way. And if that makes sense, if not, please adjust it however you like, and we can reset. But I thought this would be an interesting way of getting started.
So if we're going to talk about it through semiotics, let's do it that way too.
Okay,
right?
Cool.
So one of the things that I think is important is paying attention to discourse and how people represent their beliefs, right? But more importantly, how people represent their beliefs once they believe somebody doesn't matter. And that is usually the baseline through which people are getting recruited using semiotics, symbolism, and getting filtered through this alt-right pipeline. So I tweeted that to specifically be incendiary, to watch the reaction, to watch how people respond. Because for me, as a fat, Black, disabled woman, I'm a non-starter. For a lot of people, I hold no social currency in a lot of conversations. And so I wanted to watch how people respond to this tweet, to see what the discourse would be like above that tweet and below that tweet, as a way to see how people are talking and how conversations are shifting beneath us. And yeah, when we talk about respectability politics, this is just subbing in one term for another, right? When we talk about policing behaviors and presenting a form of Blackness that appeals to a greater gaze, we're just talking about the same thing. But if you put it in such an incendiary manner, you can see the ways in which opinions are formed and people are creating community around disparaging or separating themselves from this idea. There were only a very few people who disagreed with my tweet who actually asked me what it was about, who actually asked for the context, who actually asked who I was. There were very few people who would quote tweets and insult my looks or my intelligence or the way I present myself online. Or in many cases, there were a lot of Black queer people and Black women who agreed. And so you're watching all of this kind of fall down and see where people are placing themselves based off of this one tweet. And I kick up dust all the time just to see how people will respond. But we talk about respectability politics all the time in our communities. We talk about the ways in which people are being deputized by the alt-right pipeline in order to police these presentations of Blackness. I put it in a different way, and in a particularly incendiary way, to see what the reaction would be.
So that's fascinating. So let's back up real quick. What is semiotics, or what are semiotics, so that we just to make sure everybody's on the same page with what I think you somewhat defined it already, but I just want to make sure we're clear for just in case someone in our very astute audience isn't clear on what we're talking about. But just, if you would, what is your working definition of semiotics in this sense?
Yeah, so semiotics is the study of signs, symbols, and implied meanings, how we ascribe meaning to separate words, symbols, and phrases. And a good idea of semiotics is the creation of symbols. For instance, when we talk about creating culture. So when culture is created, it is done through the repetition and the creation of symbols.
Right on.
So, for
Mm.
instance, like if you are, excuse me, if you are Indian and you see the color red, you might think wedding, whereas somebody in the Western world might think of stoplight, right? So all of these things build meaning upon one another and then create the culture within which we live. And studying those symbols kind of talk about the way culture is built.
Right on. Thank you. Appreciate that. So from there, well, you said you did this for to learn something. What is it that you think you've, or what has been revealed so far in this exercise, beyond maybe what you've already said in terms of the lack of interest in context and who you are?
Well, what's interesting about the response was watching people insult me, but then also I would click back to their profile to see what their demographics were, right? So I would go and see a tweet saying, "Oh, she's fat or she's ugly or I'd never date her or do A, B, or C," right? But then when you go on their timeline, they're saying all the right things in terms of affirming Black women. Excuse me, affirming affirming that violence happens to Black women at a disproportionate rate. And yet when it is a form of disagreement, that kind of goes out the window a little bit, right? And so you're shifting their language and their perspective based off of who is delivering what is being said.
Mm, mm. So then, what so say more if you would about the because I did watch one of your follow up. You were well, for me it came across as a follow up. I don't know exactly the chronology here, but you were
Mhm.
responding to another sister's video where she understood the one of the points you're trying to make about this alt right pipeline. So if we could sort of step back again, and forgive me and anyone else watching if because I feel I this is maybe a little slightly more disjointed than I would have hoped, but you're doing, for me at least, a great job in keeping up with my disjointedness, so I appreciate it. But
You're fine. You idiot.
so if we back up again, when you're talking
Mhm.
about this alt right pipeline,
Right.
break that down a little bit, and as I'm sure as part of your analysis, the specific role media are meant to play in producing this effect you're talking about.
Oh, 100%. So when we talk about the alt-right pipeline, what we're talking about are a series of talking points that lead people to increasingly fascistic views and anti-Black and anti queer, just towards more conservative and extreme conservative views based off of very, what you would think would be minute talking points. And along this pipeline, we're seeing people adopt the expressions of white supremacy, of homophobia, of transphobia, and not necessarily questioning what is being presented before them. And it is based off of, when conservatives recruit, they do so based off of what they are against, not what they are for. So it's really important to understand how people feel about who they are against. So when we're talking about I don't know if you wanted me to touch upon the video just yet, but when we're
Sure.
talking when we're talking about the alt-right pipeline, they are recruiting people based off of not any affirmation of an existing identity. They're doing so off of an identity of other. They're saying, I'm not this person. So what they're doing is they're creating all of these media circles to not only police the to not only police the representations of blackness, but to also provide examples of who not to be. And then they're bonding over these ideas of insecurity around changing demographics of more visible people who are different from the norm, and then saying, "Join us. This is where you get affirmation from. This is where you get community from. That them over there, the the raging feminists or the woke people, they're what are threatening what your existence actually is. But here, These rules are simple. These rules are very plain. And these are the rules that you can live by and know and never have to feel like you are up against this constant and ever shifting lens of being wrong or being cast aside for these new demographics.
So I was thinking, I'm thinking maybe we could, what do you, if we, I was thinking if I pulled up your tweet here and we played this, it would
The
give
video?
the video here. What do you think? And then we could, I think then we could build from there a little bit to clarify or add on to what you've just said. Does that?
Sure.
So I have it pulled up here. Let's see. So we want to go. All right. So
being hit in the face with the brick. She made a video about the Overton window, which I learned from her. I ain't never heard that before. And it made me immediately think of him. I immediately thought of Steve Bannon. He was an advisor to Trump. He helped him on his campaign, went into office with him. I think he was too big for the show. Trump was like, I'm the main runner of this, and so kind of pushed him out. But he made a statement that made me think about this. Hold on. So this article was written in 2021, and we're just going to move down. Bannon claimed in a tweet Monday that the Republican Party will attract the vote of 50% of black men, and the party of Lincoln will rule for the next 100 years.
Oh my God, you get it. You get it. Oh my God. Okay. I'm going to tag her video below. Watch the whole thing. Make sure that she gets the love on the video. But this is why I said what I said. The easiest way to get people to do what you want is to give the people who feel powerless power over someone else. It's that whole thing of if you give a man somebody to look down on, he will give you everything in his pocket. And I'm so serious. This is what is happening in these podcasts, in these shade rooms. They're using them to recruit. They're recruiting. And these are networks. These are entire networks. Steve Bannon had a literal playbook on how to do this, and they're doing it to black men. Because complex feelings about being marginalized require simple answers, such as dress this way, act this way, do these things. And then because inherently you know that as a black person, you are judged as a collective and not as an individual, you then go on and police other people to do those things. Such as, oh, well, if you don't want to get hit in the face with a brick, give that man your number. And the conversation around conditional protection is the same. Because if you know the protection is conditional in the first place, people are programmed to comport themselves to always be deserving of that protection. It's why this always manifests in these gender wars. And it's not just men. Black women are being recruited using transphobia. I'm so glad somebody finally got it.
All right.
I get very excitable. Sorry.
Yeah, no, I was going to say it's infectious. Right on. Okay, so I'm trying to organize some notes and some thoughts here. So I guess first of all, I'm very much moved by the argument that about the delivery of white conservative messages via black, ultimately, as I would describe them, conservative podcasts and media, etc. My own work dovetails and parallels some of that argument, albeit for along the lines of economic analysis more so than your particular focus. But when you I think rightly say in that video that all of this attempt of the alt-right encourages simple answers, was your phrase. Explain to me, if you would, how I am wrong when I see the tweet we started off with from you as performing that same function by offering an overly simplistic, as you said, incendiary statement.
Yeah.
Because because what you said in that video is much more compelling than what comes across in that tweet. And then so as I think of your tweet semiotically, I'm going in a different direction with its impact. So
right.
Anyway, go ahead. Yeah.
No, you're right. It's meant to do that. It's meant to completely separate meaning and take out of context from the video. It was never meant to be completely complimentary to the video. It was meant to provoke a reaction that would lead people to the video. You have to think about social media like nets in a pond. You're not necessarily looking at every single thing in complete context to one another. A lot of times things are taken out of context or taken out of place or taken out of an entire timeline. And then you're having people react to things that are out of place. And then when you see the video in the greater context, people start to understand what you're talking about. But to get a lot of times when you want to get people in the door, you say the incendiary thing, get them back to your timeline, get them to watch the video. And so, yeah, when the incendiary tweet and when the semiotics and the impact of saying that is really controversial and angering and feels very upsetting, 100%. But how people react to that moment and how people react to the video, that's where I like to see the friction. That's where I like to see the conversation, the discourse play out. That's where I like to see how people use symbols to navigate that space. So I'm using it in multiple different ways.
So, but if so then I'm wondering, so then from your, if I'm hearing you correctly, then I'm definitely using social media wrong because,
No.
because if my goal would be to use social media to whatever extent I think possible, and that's another perhaps segment of this discussion, to separate, for instance, because you talked about separating concepts from symbol, to separate policing from the institution of the police, then I see your tweet as working against that effort and encouraging people back into the silo, to retreat back into the silos that they've been conditioned into in the first place, as opposed to being challenged to break themselves out of those silos. Right. So so that's what I'm saying. If my goal is to say, again, in this context, to separate the idea of policing that men absolutely do or are encouraged to do, and I like the way you were putting that in Black communities, from these as Daruba bin Wahad says, the armed agents, the institutionalized armed agents of the state, to draw out those differences. If I want to do that, it feels like I'm not going to be able to do that if your tweet there wasn't going to help me do that.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, no, it wasn't. It was never going to. Yeah, like it was never going to do that. Right? Like it was never going to. Like, and I think it's really important to note that when we talk about people falling down this alt-right pipeline of this rhetoric, it does result in real violence. It results in very real violence. And that's important to note, that these are not like, in the video I mentioned what is called the Overton window. I don't know if you are familiar, but the Overton window is something where rhetoric is used to expand on what violence is possible, right? And when we talk about these like podcasts and all of these things, they normalize violence against real people, even in outside of these spaces. Because when the insecurity of not feeling like you know what the rules are, or that there's all these people that are superseding this identity that you built for yourself, when you see them out in the real world, they are presented as real threats, not just idea of threats, real threats. It results in real violence. People are getting hurt and harmed. And to be very, very clear, what is happening with Black men in the Black community is the same that's happening in a lot of different communities, multiple different communities. In fact, Steve Bannon did a world tour to go to different countries and to create cultural translations of the exact same methodologies to do this exact thing, to bring people to these more conservative and violent views. And so when we talk about like the deputization of these people that are in these alt-right spaces, we have to first of all recognize that it results in real violence and see that the language that we use shapes the real violence that we experience in the real world. Or a lot of times the excuses or the I don't know, like I'm at a loss for words, but just the idea that somebody deserved it because they had an identity that was counter to these spaces. This like the playbook is there, it is everywhere, and it manifests differently in different communities. When we talk about how this moves about, when we talk about how it manifests in different communities, we have to talk about how it looks to us specifically. Because if we do not, then what's going to wind up happening is we're going to take a broad strokes approach to deprogramming some of these ideals, and it's not going to work. It's not going to land with the majority of people because it's not culturally sensitive to how they were recruited in the first place.
Right. I think I'm following you, except that when you take the particular relationship that Black people in the U.S. have to the police, and really African people
Mhm.
throughout the diaspora have to all colonial settings and the police that protect them, those settings, that is. And you, in other words, when you describe those Black men in this case who are themselves colonized victims of police as themselves police, as opposed to the distinguishing the difference between, again, institutional police, the institution of police, and
The
the
verb.
act of policing.
Mhm.
How again, I just don't see how that's helping to contradict the Bannon-like efforts. It in fact seems to do what you are rightfully saying Bannon's efforts are intended to do. That is to project an image of Black men as then deserving the violence they end up suffering.
No, I don't think that it justifies the violence. I think it shocks people into realizing that this dynamic exists
Mm.
within these communities, right? Because when we're talking about institutional violence, we also have to talk about the institution of patriarchy and heteronormativity and how people, like I've said, they are being deputized. When we talk about the organization of the alt right, we're not thinking about just a bunch of people that are individuals. They are networks of individuals that are reporting to one another, that are collaborating and organizing together, that are cultivating power together, and then utilizing it in very damaging ways. For instance, this entire discourse started because I was talking about a woman who was hit in the face with a brick for denying a man access to herself and her phone number. And excuse me. And a lot of the responses that we've seen online, specifically on TikTok, are of men mythologizing this brick man and saying that it should have happened again. And that they hope the brick is okay. And that they hope that they can find their own bricks. It's only 58 cents for a brick. That is okay to do these things. And they're commiserating and organizing together in the comment sections of these videos. And in fact, the woman who reported that this happened to her had her account mass reported as she was talking about her experience, as she's in the hospital. Her account was taken down and deleted as she's trying to fundraise to get her supports met, her financial needs met in this moment. So there is definitely a mobilization that is happening to silence people.
So again, I guess really if there's, to the extent that there's a disagreement, I guess what it is tactically. I'm not. That's really
Oh
it.
yeah.
So I don't mean to belabor the point, but it's just because I'm not here at all to dispute the issue of male violence or what has happened to this woman. Although I've been, I'm not really following the story too carefully, so I'm not. I'm just really only reacting to that tweet in a vacuum almost, which is
That's which is
in
what I
part
wanted
sort
you
of
to
my
do.
point. Right.
Which is what I wanted you to do.
Right. And I guess that's the part I'm going to have to continue to catch up to. So listen, so just to be just if it's all right with you, in the service of being somewhat mindful of time, because I want to give you a chance to talk about other aspects of your work, and then
Right.
if you have time in maybe 20 minutes or so, we can come back to any comments or questions from the chat, which I've been studiously avoiding for now. If that's cool with you, and then maybe we can come back to other issues or come back even to this one. Or if that's not cool, we could stay here. We could do whatever you want. But I just wanted to at least give you a chance to talk about some other aspects of your work. And I was hoping to even start with again a sort of a step back at this phrase media literacy. And ask you just to say a word or two about how you understand it and approach it or define it, and then maybe some of the specifics of its application to your work around Black womanhood, disability, etc.
Yeah, so media literacy is basically a practice. It is a practice of interrogating the media that you consume on a daily basis, as well as asking questions of the media and how media is created. And it is giving people the tools to be smarter consumers of news, of discourse, of social media, what have you. And when it comes to media literacy, a majority of people do not feel secure in their own media literacy. And we have an issue with literacy in general in the United States. I think over 54% of people do not read above a sixth grade reading level. And so when we talk about how people absorb media, a lot of times it's very much so at a surface level. And to be quite honest, it's not their fault. Media literacy takes time, it takes practice. And a lot of people don't have the time to absorb the media that they are consuming on a daily basis.
Yeah, right on. So how is it? We've talked with a number of well, let me ask you this. I got a very specific question. So a lot of my work is around this what I'm talking about is the mythology of the phrase buying power and how it's weaponized against Black people to blame Black people for their poverty. And over the last 6 or so months, through one viewer in particular, I've been asked to apply that analysis to the world of disabilities. And I've though I didn't add it in any meaningful way into my updated work, I at least have become introduced to an increasing, for me, I think it is, for me at least, an increasing use of this disabled buying power to make an argument through the marketing and advertising world that those with disabilities need to be considered more of a market, a target market, and they represent I forgot the exact dollar figure that is being claimed, but this font of this pool of wealth that could be tapped into. And I just started to notice some of the similarities. That is, we're not going to address ourselves in terms of media to this disabled community with an actual concern for how they live, are treated, paid, considered, welcomed. But we are going to look at them as a community to be targeted with ads and marketing, likely to distort what they think is their reality economically, et cetera. So how do you, so I say all that to say, when you're approaching the issue of media literacy as it relates to the disabled community and the Black disabled community, what are some of the specific issues that you tackle in your work? What do you see happening that we all need to be more cognizant of?
I think in general, the main issue is that we don't trust disabled people to speak about our own experiences and what our needs actually are, as well as the intersection between a lot of literally any marginalization has the highest rate of disability amongst that dynamic. So when you talk about the buying power of disabled people, it's often framed in a way to talk about the idea that disabled people are only valuable once we contribute to the economy in such a way. If you look back to the Nazi rhetoric of the early 1930s and 1940s, disabled people were considered useless eaters. Basically, that we had no economic value, that we were a drain on society, that we should not exist, and that led to disabled people being exterminated prior to World War II entirely. And when we reframe disability through buying power, a lot of the time we're saying this is how disabled people be valuable. This is how disabled people exist in society. And this is the way that we can capitalize on their existence in a society that sees no value in them otherwise. And so that's how I kind of see it being utilized. I think there are a lot of things that disabled people want in the advertising space and want um, in terms of consumer products. But a lot of the times, our needs aren't necessarily centered. They're centered through the lens of non-disabled people who are in our lives or who are around us.
Right on. Right on. Um, and again, big shout out to Josh in particular for putting some of these questions together for me, because he's got one here for me to ask you that is about my own interests that I wouldn't have thought to come up with on my own. So I appreciate that he did this for me. But he puts here, I've been using in one of my own classes this semester the work of Chris Simpson in Science of Coercion as a foundational text to understand mass communication in the field of comm studies in this country. Do you have any foundational texts that you personally use or that you have used to design your current course or any other course when you talk about comm studies and media literacy?
Yeah, so I really do love the work of like Edward Said and Orientalism, looking through the lens of media through othering. I love, there's this book called Semiotics. It's on my nightstand. I can't think of the author right now, but it goes over the entire course of semiotics. And I really just rely on my grad studies to talk about to kind of like a cursory view of a media literacy, because I know that a lot of people, like I said, do not have the time to get into like the textual readings and the analysis. I think um, that's very, very difficult. And just reading, quite frankly, reading any text is pretty good for media literacy. Understanding active voice versus passive voice, how people are acted upon versus being actors in text, and parsing out how language is used. And then I also did a couple of linguistic studies when I was in the undergrad as well. But yeah, those are kind of the texts that I go to, with like semiotics and Orientalism, in order to read some of those perspectives of othering.
Right on. And what was it like being in Paris, doing that study in Paris? What I was thinking of what's that song? I'm an Englishman in New York. I was thinking I'm a disabled African in Paris, disabled African woman in Paris.
Well,
Like, what was that like?
oh my God. I so Paris is one of the most segregated cities you'll ever experience in your life. Like I lived, for my first semester, I lived in Batignolles, which is the 17th arrondissement. And if you literally, so you would go on one side of this bridge, and I would cross the bridge to go get groceries, and it would go from all white people, I mean all white people, to all Africans and Arabs and immigrants, and it was literally night and day. Like you would cross this bridge, and these are what the neighborhoods look like. And there was a lot of I thought it was going to school is fun. I always love learning. I'm very much one of those people where like if you give me a book in a classroom, just like let me hang out there all day. Um, and but it was nice. But there was a lot of misogynoir. There's a lot of things that went on, but yeah, I existed with a really good cohort. I had a lot of black girls that were ahead of me in my courses, and I thought that was very interesting. Um, to kind of experience that with them, and that was exciting. And then I got to spend a month in India to do some work there.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay. By the way, and just in case we're not getting to everything that folks are interested in terms of Professor Barberin's life and work, the link to all of it is in the show description, her Patreon, websites, etc., and so forth. So please dig in. Although it seems like the whole world has already done that, and I'm the last one to the Barberin party. So I apologize, and I'll take my late pass. So folks, listen. If you have any, if you're okay with a few minutes at least, I don't know what your time is like. We can keep going. I'm not rushing, but just if folks have any comments or questions, please recycle them back to the top of the chat. I'll start peeking in there. Of course, super chats get highlighted automatically, so feel free. And I don't know if it's an actual question, but I did see his name pass through the chat real quick, and it was something that I thought about in reviewing some of your work, at least the work of Stuart Hall in cultural studies. Does his work factor in yours at all, or do you have use or criticism for it?
I think a majority of the work that I pull from in terms of like critical studies are from Audre Lorde, more so because she spans the intersection of disability and Blackness. I've not read up too closely on Stuart Hall as of late, but he is on my to be read list.
Okay, right on. And of course, Dr. Tommy Curry's name I see popping up in the chat. Have you engaged him or his work at all? And folks who've been asking, he's been on here before. He's always welcome back. But I'm sorry. Go ahead. Yeah.
Oh no, I'm not familiar with Dr. Tommy Curry's work. No.
It's black men studies or black male studies, and the man not is his not his own man. The man, he's written a lot, but that's anyway. Ricky is saying, let's not start that up. Okay, all right. My fault. I'm just looking through the comments here. So yeah, I mean, I see people referencing the tweet again. Let me come back to my own, like the tactic, like how. So because you said something earlier, you said that when you reviewed the tweet, the Twitter accounts of some of those who were critical of you in response to that tweet, you said a lot of them, if I remember correctly or understood you, you were saying that a lot of them had something mean or inappropriate for you, but were presenting themselves differently on their timelines. And so I'm wondering to what extent then you see the tactic as being successful, if that is in fact the case, of bringing people to your tweet and then to your deeper analysis and other commentaries. In other words, my general argument has been in a different context. Like when people say, well, I saw the Spike Lee's film on Malcolm X, and even though it had all these flaws in it, it at least introduced me, and I could then study Malcolm and learn from I always disagree with that. I always feel like if you're introduced inappropriately or incorrectly to a topic and it's projected or imposed as a dominant media, or pop culture, the response is often to accept that as more or less accurate and not to follow up on it. So I admit to taking that general response into to your comment that you did this intentionally to be incendiary, meaning to bring people to a deeper, to another level.
Well, like I said, it's not just that. I wanted to see how people respond. Like I want to see how people respond to somebody that doesn't matter. That does not matter to them. I want to see how they respond with the symbols of what they also profess to be against. It's not necessarily like for me, it was a multidimensional tweet. Not only did it bring people who understood what I was talking about back to my page and got some people to investigate further, but I also got to see about how people talk and how people discourse and how people represent their beliefs or how they discredit or play this role. Not necessarily play the role, but how they respond to me when I'm nobody to them, when I'm optional, when I don't matter. Because you have to understand, I've been very open with who I am online. And to be abundantly clear, I kick up dust in a lot of different communities just to see how people respond because I want to see how the discourse is trending. Because that usually informs the way I talk about things in the future. When I look at how people are responding to who doesn't matter, that's usually a baseline for how people engage in discourse and conversation on politics going forward. And that's how people are being recruited through the people that don't matter to them. Through the people that they're being um, told that they are part of, that they need to police or police these representations of these people. So I wanted to see how are they interacting with other similar media? How are they reacting to other thought lines? Because if I'm using policing or police as a metaphor, how are they talking about it in other ways? Because when people talk about Steve Bannon and the vote being nearly 50% of Black men in the Republican Party in 2020, whatever, people talk about it in terms of a vote. But people paying attention to how people speak about what they believe, that gives you more insight than how they vote. A vote is one thing, a vote is one day. Leading to that, how they get there, that's the important part. Because here's the thing. When we talk about the alt-right pipeline, we're not just talking about Republicans versus Democrats. We're talking about Democrats that are flipping as Republicans while they're in office, utilizing some of the same talking points. You have to watch how people are being streamlined into different political ideologies, regardless of party, to see what political points they're going to attach themselves to when it comes time to exercise political power. How do we actually get that? And social media gives us unlimited access to these responses, unlimited access to how people talk and think and organize and discuss and come together over certain ideas, even the ideas around somebody that they disdain in this moment. So how are these viewpoints going to be utilized going forward? Because
See,
when I
that's it.
talk
Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
Because when I talk about how othering happens and how recruitment through othering happens, how do you respond to something that you absolutely disdain from somebody that is othered, who is a non-starter to you in the first place? Do you feel the need to perform the same ideals that you did before? Or is that out the window? Is this me putting my foot on the scales a little bit? Maybe. But I want to see how people respond and how they organize and how they are milling about and separating themselves out and talking about different things. And it's fine. I said that particularly incendiary thing to be particularly incendiary, to watch.
So, okay, there's a couple questions that I think get to one of the points that I wanted to get to. So let me just start here. Ricky Ryan is saying, my question is, if there is a conclusion found from that social media experiment, does the tweet get deleted or does it stay up to continue to be misinterpreted? Because I was thinking, and please answer that, but I'm also thinking, because of the particular damage, I think, that is done by associating Black men with the institution of police. I'm wondering, couldn't you have conducted this experiment, so to speak, with another form of an incendiary statement similar to that fits within your analysis? The violence some Black men commit is a product of white conservative propaganda. I don't know, something you would do, obviously do better, but something that, if, to Ricky's point, is left up there, wouldn't have that residual and reverberating, damaging, symbolic
I actually put
damage.
I actually put more context beneath the tweet too. So if you want to click on it, they can do that. But I could delete it and be fine with that as well. That's not an issue. What I think too, to your point, could I rephrase it? Absolutely. Because I was thinking, even just saying, excuse me, even just saying, Black men are being recruited by the alt-right pipeline to police the actions of marginalized members within the Black community. Yeah, that would have been the exact same thing, but I would not have been able to have access to those responses at all. And I could delete it. There's no problem with that. I have no issue with that. But I wanted to see how people responded because I want to see what their sentiment is. What their true well, to me, what their true sentiment is
The other,
regarding.
that reminds me. The other thing that because when you said social media gives us an unlimited source for evaluating
Mhm.
people's responses, something to that effect.
Yeah.
I see it a little bit different. Well, not a little bit. I see it the opposite. That social media gives us a very narrow and limited view of the discourse and what is to be acceptable as dominant narrative and discourse in society. And it doesn't necessarily reflect all that there is in the discussion in the world, or should
Mhm.
be, certainly should be.
Right.
Yeah, anyway, Radical Normie says, does Imani realize that white supremacy doesn't have to be socially conservative? You need to worry
Oh, yeah.
about BW being recruited, Black women being recruited into white liberal supremacists. Does that make sense? Do you have a do I understand?
I I what I assume they're
Do
talking.
you? Sorry, I was just trying to read the question again. Go ahead. Yeah.
I assume that they're talking about worry about Black women being white liberal supremacists. I don't know how. Can you give me an example?
Yeah, let me ask Radical Normie for a follow-up there. And our comrade Kalaji is asking you, how do you not matter? You have over 200,000 followers to my 6,000. Is it irresponsible for you to run tests on oppressed people? You are purposefully ruffling dang near 250,000 people. Or you're ruffling dang near 250,000 people.
Mhm.
I guess phrased differently, do you have a greater responsibility, or can you claim to not matter, you yourself, if you have such a huge social or relatively large social media following?
I wasn't talking about my social media following. I was talking about my identity in
Mm, mm.
relation to the people who were responding to me.
Right,
Not
right.
necessarily that I had a following, that I socially do not matter.
So
Like
even
I
with sorry, go ahead.
not like socially, like in terms of the currency of having followers. I'm talking about being in this body as who I am. Um and socially irresponsible. Yeah, I think it might be socially irresponsible. But um I also think I have to watch how people discuss things. Um, and if you could point me to other qualitative posts that could help educate me on this, I'd be more than happy to read them.
I've certainly, Kalanji might, so if the goal, really, I mean, personally, the only thing I'm stuck on is that particular tweet. That's really the only thing that I
I
know I'm
know,
stuck on.
and
So
and
yeah, go ahead,
that's
go ahead.
fair. That's fair. But my question is, given that this was a conversation out of context, purposely out of context. Yeah, it's incendiary, it's angering. Of course it is.
Because, well, when you ask about, well, because I'm not immediately up to date on the research, but I know all of it's happening all the time, that there are, for instance, couldn't you have gotten to the same sort of reservoir of responses, I guess, to assess just by assessing comments on Fresh and Fit videos and Fox News videos or whatever the latest version of what's his name, the Black Manosphere guy Kevin Samuels, whoever, like, couldn't you, instead of that kind of incendiary approach, couldn't you assess the social media discussion or discourse by again, just, a qualitative assessment of comment sections, of articles, of podcasts? That would be where I don't know. Just that was off the top of my head in response to the question of where would other qualitative but
So
anyway, yeah.
So in those spaces, 9 times out of 10, what they use is InSpeak to communicate with one another.
Mm.
And a lot of times it's not how do I put it? Not necessarily an isolated group, it is a closed off group. So you're rarely seeing interactions with people who are outside of that community. Does that make sense? So like it's all one dimensional community. What I was interested in seeing is how even in more liberal spaces, people would talk about this. Because people who are not going to go to the Kevin Samuels necessarily en masse to talk about how they disagree with Kevin Samuels and his fans in his comment section the entire time. Those are harder to suss out than those are harder to suss out than the people that are agreeing with him.
Okay, let me one more suggestion using my own sort of media sources, my own media diet. I think you would find a lot of data for what you're interested in the comment sections for instance, I don't know if you're familiar with any of these folks. My favorite white guy, R.M. Brown's show. In other words, or even on shows like Sam Cedar's show. What's his show? Minority Report, I think. Yeah. My point is that this is where liberals or self-proclaimed white, even leftists, though I wouldn't necessarily call them that in terms of left, but where they go to offer up commentary and criticism of the conservative world, and sometimes even the Black Manosphere, oddly enough, where you might find, if I understood you correctly, where self-proclaimed liberals go to comment and critique that world. And then I'll stop this point. That way you don't have to throw out such an incendiary, potentially, I think, damaging, confusing, misleading tweet. But I also think with your expertise and skill set, that would actually be, because I've thought of doing a version of that, but I'm not there right now. So I was, maybe anyway, anyway. A few more questions. ZZ, thanks for the super chat. Using Black people as a social experiment to get a reaction. Is this reactionary? From the outside looking in, although in context it sounds good, the tactic is questionable. I don't have an answer. So that's ZZ. Thank you very much for putting $10 in rephrasing my question. I appreciate it. But that was essentially it. And I don't know if you want to respond. I think you, in many ways, have to the tactic.
I feel like I haven't responded. But
go ahead.
I think it's
you feel like you have. I'm sorry. Go ahead. Let me shut up. Go ahead.
I felt like I responded already, but it was incendiary to provoke a reaction, particularly from people in spaces that would never perform that in any public space ever. And I think I think it's really hard to get people's genuine reactions to things when you ask for them a lot of times. Um, and so to see how people react in anger towards me, yeah, it's it's interesting to watch.
And I don't know how. Honestly, I don't even know. Welcoming and inviting hostility online. I don't know if you definitely
I
stronger than
mean,
me
I
on that.
got death
I
threats.
can't handle it. Yeah, I wouldn't want to invite it. It's bad enough getting it when it just shows up. Yeah, go ahead.
I
Yeah.
mean, listen, I've been told to kill myself since I was born. I'm a
Mm,
disabled person. This is something that somebody says to me every single day.
mm.
Like it's not like these are not news. I was attacked online for having my groceries delivered as a disabled person prior to the pandemic. Like, yeah, like these are things that happen.
For having your groceries delivered.
Yeah,
Well, damn. So I
yeah,
guess I'm really in trouble to not be disabled and to haven't have had that done before. Is I guess I mean
yeah,
I
and
must
that's
be super egregiously horrible. Anyway, um, Musa, what's up, Musa? Musa's asking how does she feel about that tweet and the consequential analysis many walk away from other after reading it. Trans I'm sorry, let me try that again. How does she feel that tweet and the consequential analysis many walk away from after reading it translates to offline community organizing, which is most important?
right. So I'm guessing, how do I turn this into advocacy for offline organizing? Is that
Or, as I understood it, how do you see that your tweet encourages offline organizing?
uh, the tweet alone or the tweet with the context?
I read it as the tweet alone, but maybe add in the content. Maybe, I mean, I honestly I'm not sure, and Musa can elaborate and ask another question if they like. But um, so my humble suggestion to you would be answer it how you see it.
Yes. So I guess what they're asking is, how do you turn the analysis into offline organizing? I'm going to answer it like that. Um, I think what's important to note is that when we talk about movement work, a lot of stuff breaks down because of intercommunal strife and discussing and the lack of discussion around how white supremacy manifests itself within our community organizing spaces. And I think understanding the symbols with which people are being recruited and pulled away from those organizing spaces is incredibly important if we're going to catch them before they walk away, before they go towards this other arena of this comfort in understanding and resting within an identity with these set rules and ideals. And I think it's really important to understand how language shifts around a lot of these different demographics and a lot of these different groups, um, which is very interesting to watch because we're watching as even the brick has become a symbol of some of these ideas. Now you're seeing bricks being put in the comment sections of Black women across the internet. Like, is that a recruiting tool, or people being finding each other in the comment sections because of this emoji? It's really important to keep track of these things going forward and to see how people abandon belief as well when they are uncomfortable, because that's important to catch them in these spaces.
All right. Couple more questions that I found here. Are black my eyes went deaf is asking, are black women the police too because they like to dig things up about black male victims to dismiss them? Example, the Nigerian guy who got killed by the white woman. I don't know anything about this, and is this in fact true that black women like to dig things up about black male victims to dismiss them? Is there science behind that claim? I don't know. I don't know
I
if
don't
you have a response to
necessarily
that.
I don't know if they necessarily dig things up. What I will say though that is interesting is Black women, um, they are policing people, but it's usually gender queer people within the Black community, and gender nonconforming people. There's a wave of new femininity guidelines for Black women, and that's where I see it manifesting more so in these spaces.
Mm, mm. All right. I don't see any more. Did I miss any questions, folks, or comments? Or because I don't see any more. So I just want to make sure, folks, if you do have something that I missed, please, you know. But if we could, let me come back to a couple other things and maybe sort of set a bookend to this conversation a little bit. Going back to some of the basics. What brought you and maybe we could even have put together an answer to this through some of your responses already. But what brought you to this work, and particularly an interest in media or communication studies as an approach to addressing your concerns with the world?
Media studies, media and communication studies often feels like you putting words to stuff you already know and experience. And once you can understand the theories and methodologies, language is used to build culture or movements or sometimes violence. It makes the world make sense in a way that it didn't before. And I find language itself to be very interesting. I was very much so a kid where I would be as a disabled kid, I would be in the room and not only would nobody talk to me, but people would talk about me while I was there, like I wasn't in the room. So I got very used to observing how people use language. And media studies has the power, and communication has the power to empower so many people, because once you are able to converse and communicate in an effective manner in ways that people understand and identify with, you put the power back in their hands. You make sure that they have the most power to then go and utilize those skills for their own lives and their own destiny. And particularly for disabled people, I really wanted and was interested in talking about disability in a way that went against the grain of how disabled people are seen to begin with. And how, because the first thing you lose as a disabled person is your ability to be seen as a reliable narrator of your own story. And communication gives people the ability to tell their own stories and to be the navigators of their own lives and tell people what they need and who they are in a world that tells them that they don't matter to begin with.
So as academics, or as an academic yourself, I'm wondering, when you talk about the I think you used the word experiment on social media to sort of I don't know, if derive a data set for analysis of sorts. Why not, or to the extent that you haven't, why not recreate that in more traditional academic studies with controls and variables and all of that to reach the, or to assess the environment as you were setting out to with at least that or some of those tweets.
I
In
mean,
other
are
words,
there?
yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
I mean, like pretty much because I don't have the access.
Mm.
I'm not in any experimental spaces at this point, or academic spaces. Um,
Mm.
and social media has been my access. And I observe discourse all the time without saying anything or being the person that is the lightning rod for the discourse. Um, and to be clear, I do this uh, quite often with white people and white women to see how their responses are as well and how they're moving through discourse as well. This is the first time I've done it on Twitter.
So I mean, I'm sorry. So you're saying, wait. So so you're saying you do this on TikTok as opposed to Twitter? Is that what you were saying? Is that what you mean?
Yeah, like when I talk about white women and what, for instance, weaponizing competence or utilizing their own discourse to kind of provoke a reaction from them, to see how they're moving through discourse and learning and creating symbols around disdain as well.
All right, right on, right on. Let me just check again. Any other? All right, I only got a couple more here, and then I'll double back to the chat one more time, just to let's see. And again, big shout out to Josh for helping with some of this here. Oh, I like. Which topic from your course do you think is the most understudied or misunderstood?
So I'm going through and kind of building upon multiple different themes and then kind of reiterating them over and over and over again. I think the one that is the most misunderstood is semiotics. And it is very difficult to kind of introduce people to semiotics and then show them that in the real world, because they've been absorbing it their entire life, but kind of putting a pinpoint on how it actually works in practice is very, very difficult to kind of get them to that point. Logos are good examples in terms of like creating symbols and implied meanings through the repetition of specific symbols in a certain space. Um, but how that applies to like language is much harder to impress upon people how that works.
Any chance you familiar with Chayla Sandoval's work? I'm going back some years now. I'm probably dating my own self, but her work just popped into my head. Because she does a lot, like, my passing through the world of semiotics was in the context of anti-imperial or anti-colonial studies, and the use of symbol and imagery via propaganda to impose, Eurocentric notions of beauty, standards, civilization on targeted colonized populations. So it just popped in my head. I was just curious if her work or any of that.
She didn't come up in my post-colonial studies, but in study post-colonial, which is very much in the same similar vein, you could very much see that semiotics take place in the narratives of those stories and those ideas. I'm trying to think, like Woman at Point Zero, like trying to think of the other book that I read that was like, I have a terrible memory.
No, it's all good. I know. I'm just throwing it on. I'm just throwing it out at you, and I just happened to be remember Chayla Sandoval, and what was the title? There was one book I used to use it all the time. Oh my God, it'll come up. A Methodology of the Oppressed. That's the title of the book, and she talks. And it's also big shout out to Dr. James Turner, the late great Dr. James Turner, the founding director of the Africana Studies and Research Center. Who used to have on his office door, that an old black and white newspaper clipping, it's not clip, but a photo that showed the little black boy in his Superman cape looking at the bathroom mirror, and the reflection he sees is the white male Superman. Just so it was just semiotics on display, colonial semiotics. It was just and I just always thought that was just a very basic, simple but powerful. And I don't think there were even any words on it. It was just all the image just said everything. Yeah, sorry, go ahead. Yeah,
I'd be curious. How do you feel? Have you noticed any the semiotics of race in your lived world right now? I'd be curious to know, like, what have you identified?
Well, my immediate response is the increased deployment of the fallacy of interracial relationships.
Okay.
So being the product of one, I keep seeing more and more popular representations of these smiling multiracial families, suggesting a world that doesn't exist, and suggesting, yeah. So I don't know if that gets exactly to the question you're asking, but that is for me, and I just haven't done any work with it. I haven't put any science or any. It's just when I'm moving about the world, and not seeing or even seeing studies suggesting a tremendous increase per se, particularly as those relationships include Black women in real life. I'm seeing it more and more depicted in media, and I'm very suspicious as to why that's happening. But anyway, that's my first
You know,
admitted. Yeah.
I have questions though of what you're seeing though, because that's fascinating. So are you seeing more Black women in interracial relationships represented, or
Yes, and that's been sort of my problem, that the
Okay.
data doesn't support that that's happening in real life, and yet more of the interracial, and even in popular films, I'm even thinking the one with the Netflix one with Adam Sandler being married to Queen Latifah,
Oh yeah,
like
that
that
was
kind of stuff.
awkward.
Huh?
That was awkward.
Yeah. So and even the more recent one with Jonah, what's his name, and what's her name? Now I can't remember everybody. The one with Eddie Murphy in it, where he wore that horrible shirt that said Fred Hampton was murdered. I'm so irritated by that. Talking about language and the importance of definition. I mean, murdered and assassinated are two different things, but.
Right.
But anyway, so I see all of that, and then the data doesn't. At least the last time I looked at the data a little while ago, doesn't suggest that Black. In fact, they said the opposite. Even though there's an increase in interracial dating, Black women are the least likely to be involved, and yet, so I'm just I don't know. Again, I don't have any science, or I haven't done any real work on it. It's just, it was that you asked the question, and that is at the top of my head, because I feel like everywhere I go now, I see these depictions, and it's not just Black women with white men, but it's of all the varieties of interracial relationships, and it's and I keep taking it as. And I did see somebody, I think, was trying to ask you what you think of Black nationalism and liberation, but because I keep taking this as, at least in part, as a semiotic attack on the idea of Black love. That the idea that if two Black people are in communion with one another, that is the oh God, we're going backwards now. This is anyway.
No, because that's so that's the thing. Like what you just observed is very fascinating to me, because when we talk about desirability and like as a symbol, usually Black women are rarely if ever represented. So I'm curious as to what the greater implications are that Black women specifically, because that's why like now you've got my brain moving, because why us? Why Black women? That almost rarely, if ever, happens.
So just to tie it all back up, so when I see, again, out of context, as you said, was the intent. When I see your tweet, I did do this. It does plug in to even this question you just asked about what I'm seeing happening. So I'm reading it, and I'm saying, so Black men depicted with Black women is seen as and by the way, I noticed this on some recent traveling, that even when it's same gender loving couples, the interraciality of it, if that's a word, is increased. So I'm saying, regardless of the sexual preference, if the couple is Black, that seems to be the negative. That seems to be. So when I see your tweet, and it seems to almost be playing into this broader effort to say, Black men are as much a problem for Black women and anybody else as even the institution of police. So
right. Because that's the question. Because that's the whole. That makes sense, because why would Why? Because they would not choose. Okay. Like, yeah, like that makes sense. Why they would not choose us to represent interracial relationships. Normally, when we talk about interracial relationships, usually it's depicted at the very least as a black man with a non-black woman. So why women though?
So,
Because
but
now,
yeah, sorry, go ahead.
yeah, because now it's very much so. Now I'm very intrigued as to like the greater implications that go in line with all this.
So I admit again, I see it as part of an ongoing attack, and I think there's a broad attack on all colonized people and black people in particular.
Mhm.
And then it becomes that broad attack becomes very particular as it targets specific segments of all these communities. So as I'm seeing it, this broad attack, this broad colonial attack is then now targeting specifically in the concept of all black love through the guise of targeting, in this case, black men as the problem. So saying to black women, by increasingly depicting them in interracial relationships and then targeting black men as the problem, even the problem in the black community, that the encouragement is to dissolve black love in black communities in favor of black women finding their shining white or Asian or brown or whoever knight, and black men just get condemned even farther into to so really the question I'm asking you is a challenge I'm putting to myself, that really what I'm saying is I should find a way to put some actual organized methods and research to my feeling and see what it produces. Like, can I demonstrate an actual increase in interracial relationships being depicted? Can I then demonstrate the increase of that depiction, including more black women and non-black partners? And then could I then somehow attach this to my hypothesis that this is part of a broad attack on all black communion as a way to further disrupt histories of anti-colonial struggle? I don't know. I would have to get some work to do, but yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, no, I think what you're pointing to is like a semiotic triangulation, so like, yeah, yeah. It sounds because like the community, mm, mm. Yeah, it sounds like they're triangulating, right? Black men in this corner, right? But the question is this a neoliberal response to calls for more representation that is having this impact? Because remember, when we were talking about when we talk about, Oscars too white or whatever, if we remember that movement, there was a ricochet and kind of like this response of making sure that as many people of color were in media as possible after that. So now I'm curious, something else is going on.
By the way, this came up on our Twitter feeds earlier. Are you connected with Crip Nation, and what are some of the focuses of disability justice work, i.e., fights for
Yeah.
benefits, housing? How do people plug into that work?
So disability justice work is often done very regionally. It is done in your communities. I am familiar with the work of T.S. Lewis, Dustin Gibson, and those folks. They do a lot of on the ground advocacy. I remember they were working for a time with Be Heard, which was providing ASL translators to people who were in jails and prisons at the time. One of the biggest disability justice movement calls for at the moment is home and community based living for disabled people and making sure that disabled people have resources in the community. And when we talk about the intersectionality of disability, when I say that every single ism wears itself on the disability community, I mean that. When we're talking about minimum wage increases, we need to have direct support workers that are being paid above a minimum wage, but when we are being paid way above the minimum wage, but when we talk about increases the minimum wage, it relies on disability. It relies on disability justice and advocacy, because disabled people are allowed to be paid below the minimum wage in 38 states, and that legislation is always tied to a minimum wage increase. Anyways, making sure that disabled people have access to their communities, to the resources in their communities. What I can very much so predict, though, and what I'm very, very wary of at the time being, is a push to institutionalize disabled people, which will then be a push to institutionalize Black people and women. Because usually those things go hand in hand when we talk about how racism is inherently disabling.
Oh,
So those
damn.
are all, yeah. So we're very much on a precipice of losing a lot, and a lot. And because we don't pay attention to how disability manifests itself in our own community, we really have to address it, because the cogs are turning, the wheels are turning. We are very much so in a dangerous spot. Particularly when we talk about Michael Orr and his conservatorship and guardianship. Um, his situation was unique in that he signed papers. There are people across the country who have had conservatorships taken out on them without their consent or their permission, or sometimes even notice by the courts. So this is something to keep people's eyes on and to constantly be watching.
Ooh, I just banned somebody from the chat. You can't talk about Daruba like that around here. Sorry, forgive the interruption, Imani. Woo.
No worries,
That
no
threw
worries.
that comment threw me off. I was like, you got to go. I'm sorry. That's a definite bias around here. You went way beyond criticism. Criticism is cool, but you can't be saying all that. Got to get you out of here. So damn, that just threw me off. I had my next question. You just said damn it.
Disability is going to be used to institutionalize people.
Right. Damn. Oh man, my bad. Yeah, he said F Kalanji too, but that's all right. We're used to that. People talking. No, I'm just playing. He was wild with the Kalanji, but then he doubled down on the Daruba. Now I'm sorry, Imani, please forgive me. That just threw me off. I've lost my.
No,
I have to admit, I lost my spot here. That was
listen,
crazy.
I understand more than anybody how a chat can go awry. So
that's what it was. That's what it was. That was my question. So wait, I think I missed this initially. So did I hear you say a moment ago you're not in the academy per se? You're not an institutionalized academic? You're free? You're a liberated scholar?
Yeah, I do this this is me.
You're an escaped? No, I'm just playing.
No, I work for myself. I'm not I'm not I'm not attached to any institution. I work for myself. I do this for fun and for free. I use my graduate degree to translate media literacy for everyday folk, because I genuinely think it's a skill that people need to have. And I want people to have it. When I tell people, like, this is my calling, like, this is what has made my life make sense. So if I ever go back to school, and I always ask Black women to talk me out of getting a second master's or a PhD, because that just means something else in my life has gone awry. But yeah, I'm not attached to any sort of.
So have you ever been? Because I'm out now. I'm actually. So you've never been in the academy professionally then, outside of the. Oh, okay. Wow. Okay.
I was a professional.
I'm sorry.
I was a professional disability advocate. I worked for a protection advocacy agency for disabled people.
Okay. Yeah. Well, I want to say I'm jealous, although sometimes there are benefits to being the institutions can have some benefits here or there, but in general, I'm just jealous. So congratulations.
Thank you.
Yeah. but I think, yeah, I let that one. I must have let that one slide by when I first thought about it.
Yeah, and Ricky in the chat was asking about SNAP benefits, and
Oh, really? I
um,
missed that. Okay, yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
yeah, I think it's really important to note that there is a move to purge tons of people off state benefits, particularly after the emergency. Excuse me. Particularly after the COVID emergency ended, a few million people, a few million people lost healthcare benefits and SNAP benefits. And from what I'm hearing from some offices of Social Security across the country, they are purging a lot of disabled workers from Social Security jobs at this point. So be on your P's and Q's with your paperwork if you need supports. Make sure that all your documentation is filed on time, and make sure that those things are I's are dotted, T's are crossed. It's really no joke out here. There's a lot of movement work happening under the radar to make sure that people are kicked off of any sort of benefit. And it's really devastating to a lot of communities, and it's uh, very scary, very very scary. Particularly when you couple that with the movement to institutionalize people. When we think of Vivek Ramaswamy, he made like his performance at the RNC actually increased support despite wanting to uh, mass institutionalize disabled and mentally ill people. That's very scary. That is very frightening when you think about the implications given history.
Yeah, because even some of that, you mentioned the Nazis earlier, and some of that wasn't it tied into even pre-Nazi USA with the eugenics movement here and all of
Oh
that. I
yeah,
mean, yeah, there was a
yeah.
whole, yeah,
Well,
that sounds crazy. Yeah.
yeah, eugenics and race science was the practice. Like ableism and racism go hand in hand. They are bosom brothers. They um they were the eugenics project was designed, and the race science project was designed to attribute disability inherently to blackness so that it was easier to control and or eradicate black people. The same was done to indigenous folks as well. And our healthcare, our access to health is generally called into question all the time because of um because of these things. And so it's very dangerous, and the rhetoric that is being used, particularly post pandemic, or what we believe to be post pandemic, is very very frightening. What happened after the 1918 flu pandemic was disabled people were institutionalized en masse, and then the programs that they used eventually in the Holocaust, they perfected on disabled people because disabled people were culled together to be used in as part of these experiments.
Listen, Imani Barberin, I'm very appreciative of you coming through today. It's been a pleasure to get to build with you a little bit. And let me give you any chance to say anything else that we didn't get to that you want to mention, or and again, I'll remind folks that all of your contact and information is in the show description. And I invite people to follow up on their own beyond today. But yeah, let me give you any chance for any last words. But thank you for coming through.
Yeah, well, thank you all for having me, and I appreciate everybody who was here.
All right on. All right, well, take good care. Peace, because I know you're
You
willing
too.
to fight for it, like Fred Hampton used to say. And we'll look to build another time. Thanks for coming through. Take good care.
You too. Have a good one.
You too. All right, everybody. So, as an unfree academic, I'm gonna have to get ready for one of my 4 courses. It's like I'm just playing. Let me stop complaining. Hey, I really appreciate Professor Barberin for coming through. I appreciate all of you for joining us as well live, and those who will see this later. Appreciate you as well. Big shout out to everybody. Please make sure you like, share, subscribe, ring the bell to make sure you don't miss anything. Put this stuff in your socials. Support our Patreon if at all possible. go back and catch up on all the great programs that have been airing lately and in the past on this platform. Big thanks to everybody for helping us get well over 30,000 subscribers so far. And we want to continue this little movement of maintaining our subscriptions here on YouTube, but moving any paid memberships over to Patreon. So if you are willing to come up off of even $2 a month for BPM, particularly so we can afford Diallo's salary. It's mostly for please go to blackpowermedia.org and find the Patreon link or show description as well, and do what you can. If not, like, share, subscribe. It's all free to you and helps the platform greatly. So again, big shout out to Josh and Aaliyah, the Mix What I Like crew. Big shout out to the Discord that produced today's content. And again, Professor Barberin for coming through. I thoroughly enjoyed the discussion. And we'll catch you all tomorrow morning for Earn Your Liberation, where we're going to get into a number of different things related to Black capitalist fantasy. The latest on Brother Polite's case, probably too. I don't even know what else is coming up. But come on back for that. Jackie's show is coming up later on this evening. Kim Brown on her platform. Warrior Class Sundays with Cornell West this Sunday and Kim Brown. And I mean, a whole lot of stuff. So anyway, thanks everybody. Peace, because I know you're willing to fight for it. Like Fred Hampton used to say, catch you next time right here on I Mix What I Like and throughout the Black Power Media platform. Thanks everybody.
I mix what I like, what I like, what I like, what I like, what I like.